What if a podcast didn't really have a point, but that was the point? This is the randomness of E, where we embrace the randomness of thought, one mental zigzag at a time. I'm your host, Just E, and if you've ever followed a thought down a rabbit hole, you're in the right place. You may also wonder if you've heard my voice before, and the answer would be yes. I also record a podcast named E Says, P Says with my hubby. E Says, P Says is about our marriage and relationship of 36 years. So if you haven't heard it, please locate it on most podcast platforms and listen in. I created this podcast because, as I said, I wanted to share my randomness. You never know how sharing your journey can help someone else. If you are joining me for the first time, hello and welcome. Last week, I discussed two Daves and a David and how one Dave's mentorship and the other Dave's writings have helped me move forward in my podcast journey. If you missed it, take a listen. So this week is the seventh episode where I discuss the in between woman. I know you are wondering, what is that? Well, being a woman of a particular age, I have always felt that though we reap some of the benefits of ERA, and that was the Equal Rights Amendment for women, if you're unfamiliar, we didn't quite reach our full potential or at that time for the things that women wanted. I was in a era where my mother told me specifically in capitals, do not learn how to type. I was like, why? So the school I attended had a college track and a secretarial track. And if I had stayed in the school, I did want to learn how to type and do shorthand because I knew those things could lead me to good summer jobs while I was in college. However, my mother informed me that if I learned how to type and did it well, that I would be relegated to being a secretary for the rest of my life. So to this day, I think I still do a good 35 words per minute, which has worked for me. I type well enough to get what I need done, but not good enough to get the job. However, once my dream of becoming a doctor, pediatrician specifically, was shattered, I was lost. At the time, there were not many jobs women could do in an office that were not secretarial related without a degree. Fortunately, thanks to temp agencies, I found a niche in data entry. I may not have been able to type, but I could do between 8 and 10,000 keystrokes a minute. And that kept me employed off and on for many years. So, not having a degree and moving from hither to yon didn't help. I did work in accounting here and there, banking, mortgage, real estate, and finally tech. I also did my own thing from time to time. The other thing my mother told me when I fell pregnant, a little British humor, like somehow you fell into the body parts to make a baby and it was an accident. But it is just too cute not to share. Do not let your employer know you're pregnant till you are in the position for a bit. Otherwise, they may try to not hire you or fire you before you start. I was so confused. However, she did tell me this at a time I was in the middle of getting a job. I was being transitioned from the temp agency to a permanent position. And though it sounds crazy, there was a time that pregnancy or having a child was not protected. You had you have even heard Cardi B say that she has been in meetings with her record and touring companies and they are asking does she want to push things back till she has the baby. Tracy Braxton was excluded from the Braxtons, the singing group, because she was pregnant. For some strange reason, it was and somewhat is thought today that because a woman is pregnant or has a baby, she can't function, or appearing pregnant is not pleasing to the eye. Hence, the huge, loose fitting clothes that pregnant women used to wear. Showing or bearing your belly was a big no no. So now women wear whatever they want during that time, which is so great and freeing because as a plus size woman, I ended up wearing a larger size and bigger tops during my pregnancy because they had cute outfits for maternity wear, but they all stopped at a size 12 or 14. The other thing was maternity wear was expensive and only in specialty shops at the time that I was pregnant with my first son. So that was over 30 years ago. You couldn't go to Walmart or Target and just pick something up. For my era, it was more Target or Kmart. Since I grew up in the city, these stores didn't come into the city limits at the time. They were usually only in the suburbs. Thankfully, times have changed and women are allowed to express their pregnancy in the way they would like, and even proudly show their bellies, which is the way it should have always been. There is only one way to become part of the human race, and that is to be born through a woman. And I do believe it also applies to animals. Females are usually the ones that give birth to the offspring. So wear your belly proudly. You are creating a human being. And always thank the ancestors that spoke up, complained, or filed lawsuits for this freedom. Pregnant women are even interviewing and starting jobs during this time. That definitely didn't happen in my era because it was felt that after the baby was born, the mother would choose to stay home and not return to work. I will admit, during the time I had my children and before, that was an option. But now most households require two incomes. So women may extend their leave or find a more accommodating job, but they are going back to work. That said, as the years passed and I was working with younger ladies, I noticed there were jobs in some fields I could not imagine working in my 20s or were not available. I also saw that they had their voices and spoke up when they felt something wasn't right. They never learned to type, and some started some of these jobs straight out of high school. And when I mentioned they had their voices, also in the era that I grew up, you can have your voice, but you might be at home if you push too hard and they felt that you were trying to be uh, a troublemaker. So you had to be careful how you spoke out then. And you have to be careful now, but it's more acceptable to say that you don't like something or you feel that somebody or you are not being treated right. So, and though they had these jobs right out of high school, for my era, this was a rarity because without a degree, a lot of doors were closed. I'll never forget the young ladies talking about their trials and tribulations one day and how they felt about the work they were doing and that opportunities for the things they wanted were not available. I chimed in and said, "Hey, you have a lot more opportunities than I did at your age. I had two options, secretary or receptionist. Well, let me tell you, because I look a lot younger than I am, I think they thought I wasn't that old, but I did not hear any more complaining. And I do not regret the path I have taken through my work years. Though I wish I was more planned and focused, yes. That would have allowed me to probably be more settled in my home life as a wife and mother as that would have allowed me to be more settled in my home life as well as a wife and mother, because when you know you are going to one place daily for the next 20 years, it is a lot more settling. That just was not my journey. And if it had been, I would not be speaking to you now because I would have a lot less to share. By the way, before I started this episode, I was wondering, am I a boomer or a Gen X? I looked it up and I am considered a Gen Xer. However, there are some charts that show I am a boomer, though the title is supposed to belong to the crew of people that caused the population to explode after World War II, I believe. So I will consider myself a Gen Xer. And just like the charts and trials and tribulations, I still feel like I am in between. Have you felt like an in between woman in your working years? Well, let me know in the comments on my social media platform, Mock Media Group on Facebook, or any of the podcast platforms you listen in on. I would love to hear from you. Also, feel free to listen to the current episodes of E Says, P Says. Unfortunately, we are currently on hiatus for a bit while the Mister is convalescing. You can also check out our website, mockmediagroup.com, where you can listen and learn about all things happening with the Mock. Want to do more? Support us by filling our cup at buymeacoffee.com/mockmediagroup, or subscribe on any platform you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.